When I listened to Tchiroma today, I didn't have the impression that he spoke to the consciences of the military. Why so?
Well, he has said that over and over. And, the folks in the military who've called to pledge their allegiance to him, I do know that. And again, he's not, he may want to confirm this or not when he speaks to the nation. But I think there are enough people in the army today who totally believe that change has to come to Cameroon. And it's change for the good. It's change that would benefit the vast majority of Cameroonians, 20, 30 million Cameroonians, than change that continues to benefit a handful of Cameroonians who do not maybe even count up to 10,000. So a vast number in the army today in Cameroon want the change that benefits the country. It cannot be otherwise. It cannot be otherwise. The vast majority of our army cannot be against change that benefits the people. Otherwise, something fundamentally wrong. So I think there's been enough indication from Mr. Tchiroma that he wants an army that's Republican in nature, that continues to support our institutions and does not turn its weapons against Cameroonians. They're there to defend the nation, not to fight against citizens. So his position on that is very clear.
Exactly. After our open letter to soldiers, to the military, the gendarmes, and the police in Cameroon, we've been receiving messages in our inbox by people who are from the military and say they're from the military and saying they are very aligned with Cameroonians because they want change.
Dear compatriots, ladies and gentlemen, I take the floor in my capacity as the president-elect of Cameroon. I want to launch a wake-up call to the world in general, in particular the nation which have based their very existence on democracy and human rights protection. I want to bring to their knowledge that for the first time in the history of our nation, all Cameroonians have their back today against the war, confronted with a life-threatening menace coming from this unlawful, dictatorial, state-based terrorism, state-based gangsterism against the people. They have been arresting out of any lawful legal procedure. They have jailed hundreds and thousands of Cameroonians, deprived of their right, not because they did something, because this dictatorial regime have decided to operate ethnic cleansing, political cleansing, regional cleansing. This situation is unbearable, unacceptable. I say it in my capacity as the president-elect of this nation. I also want to bring to your knowledge the fact that all Cameroon knows it, the world in general knows it, that President Biya has never been elected by Cameroonian people. But during the swearing-in procedure, President Biya put his hand on the Bible to ask God to be the witness of his election. This is sacrilege. This is profanation. I just want to call your attention to the fact that he uses God just to fulfill his ugly purpose. This is unbearable. This is unacceptable. In my capacity, I urge this regime to give up fighting our people, to give up killing our daughters and sons. Cameroonians will never accept it. I launch an ultimatum. I give you in my capacity I give you 48 hours to liberate all of those who, out of law, unlawfully, you have arrested and jailed. Failing to doing it, Cameroonians will find themselves in a legitimate defense and free to undertake whatever will enable them to recover their freedom and to free their daughters and sons who are illegally imprisoned, jailed somewhere. This is the message I want to share. Cameroonian pass if 48 hours, as I said, they refuse to comply. Cameroonians, they are in legitimate position to defend themselves, to defend their family, and to go retrieve their daughters and sons who are unlawfully and illegally have been arrested and jailed. Keep this in mind, and for as long as this problem has not been solved, you have to remain tall and strong and ready to fight for your freedom, for your right. May the Lord bless our nation. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are welcome to the Beyond Africa podcast with me, your host, Ngalim Bernard. As you can see, we have a guest today, and that is Mr. Eric Chinje. We are going to talk about President Issa Tchiroma's latest speech, in which he came out very forcefully asserting his presidency, his win at the elections, and is calling on Paul Biya and his regime to release all those who were arrested, I dare say kidnapped, simply because they manifested their rights to demonstrate and express their opinions because they believe the Constitutional Council declared the wrong person winner. In today's speech, Issa Tchiroma Bakary is very firm and determined that he's going to carry his manifestation out to the last. He calls on Cameroonians and the international community, especially those countries who are baked and built on democracy, to respect and calls Paul Biya and his regime to respect the will of the Cameroonian people. So in this episode of the Beyond Africa podcast, we are going to go through this speech. Eric is going to tell us what he thinks and what he believes the president is up to, and if at all the president makes sense at this material time. Eric Chinje, you are welcome to the Beyond Africa podcast.
Thank you very much, Sharon, for having me here, and greetings to all of your listeners, viewers. Thanks again.
Thank you. I was wondering if you rest or sleep at all. In this part of the world, when I'm getting up, you are active. When I'm going to bed, you're active. At what time do you rest? I noted this since even before the elections, when we started working together to shape communication.
Well, thanks, Bernard. Thanks for the concern. And all I have to say is that I have learned, I've come to go with very little sleep. I usually need about 3 to 4 hours daily, and it suits me well. So that gives me enough time to work with you and others in the United States, from here in Europe, in Africa, where I am right now, and also to work with folks on this, on the continent, given the 4 to 5 hours, sometimes 6 hour time difference.
Thank you so much. But is that not detrimental to your health? Don't work too hard, and then when we get into the promised land, you are no longer there.
No, I've been doing this for most of the last 50, 60 years, actually. As I was growing up, circumstances surrounding my growth from adulthood into professional life compelled me to keep that rhythm. And it has become part of my own existence. As I say, I get along with 4 good hours of sleep. It's more than enough for me. And it allows me to have longer days and shorter nights sometimes.
All right. Thank you so much. I was watching a video by Elon Musk, and he said if he sleeps less than 6 hours, he's awake for the rest of the day, but he's not going to be productive. But it looks like it's completely different with you. You are productive whenever I talk to you. Whenever we see you, you sound the same for the 20 hours during which you are awake.
Well, that's it so happens.
So thank you so much. Let's talk about President Tchiroma Bakary's speech. I know you've watched it. You've been with him all this while. When you listened to his speech today and watched him talk, what were your first impressions? Did he come across as someone who is defiant, who means what he says, or was that some political communication just to keep the masses hyped up?
As I said, the last time I was with President Chiroma, and this was just less than 48 hours away. The last time I was with him, I saw a rejuvenated individual, totally in line with what he needs to be doing, and understanding the need for him to quickly reconnect with people in the country and start defining the agenda going forward. And that's what I think I saw. And this is only the beginning. And as I say, we are at the start of a process. The process might be short, might be long, but it is a process that will result in profound change in Cameroon. Bernard, we have a country that has been built on falsehoods, and a house of cards built on lies will crumble, even with a gush of the wind. I think what we are seeing Mr. Chiroma try to do is to bring us back to the values of our ancestors, if you'd allow me to say that, to the values that are based on truth and the experience of our people. That's what Mr. Chiroma wants to bring us back to.
How did you read that in Chiruma's speech today? Did he come across as someone who wants to lay solid foundations, or it comes across as someone who just wants to cause chaos because he believes he won and he wants to be president at all costs?
Well, that's a very good question. Let me tell you, if I will not commit myself I'm not working for Mr. Chiroma. I'm working for Cameroon. And if I did not think that he has what it takes to help us clean up that country, to help get Cameroon back on a track of progress and growth, to bring back, as I said, the fundamental values of our nation. If I did not think that, I will not be with him. I've told you, I'm sure, that Mr. Biya offered me positions asked me to come back into to the country and to take up a position in his government. So it's not for want of, it's not for any particular interest that I'm in this. My only interest here is the country. And I've seen that Mr. Chiroma, as most Cameroonians seem to have seen, that he's an embodiment of that change. That's why I support him. That's why millions of Cameroonians supported him. And that's why he is the elected president of Cameroon.
One thing you have underscored so far throughout your communication with the population, with the people about Issa Tchiroma, is that he is committed to fighting the cause that is going to right the wrongs that Cameroon has suffered over the last 48 years, even before the last 48 years. So when he came out today in his message, from a communications standpoint, what should Cameroonians read as le non-dit, the invisible?
The one thing Mr. Chiroma is saying is, take your power back. He's underscoring the fact that power belongs to the people. It's the people who have to determine whether there's change or not. Change, he may be the personification of change in terms of the programs he's putting forward, but this is not about a Chiroma change. This is about a Cameroon change agenda. And that change process is in the hands of the people. So when he says, release those you've incarcerated for no obvious reason, end the illegal actions you're undertaking, and then saying, go and release your people, calling on Cameroonians, go to those jailhouses and ask them to release your people. I think that's in the natural scheme of things. Take your power back. If 1 million people stand in front of Nubel and Kondengi and the other jailhouses and say, release our people, I don't see who will stand against that. So what Mr. Chiroma is trying to do is to, the whole the agenda here, and saying it is the people's agenda. They are the ones who have to, make sure it is implemented. And he is in this process as obviously a leader, but he doesn't make the process. It's a people's process.
Thank you so much, Eric. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are joining us now, you are watching the Beyond Africa podcast with me, your host, Ngalim Bernard, and my guest, Mr. Eric Chinje. As you are joining, please kindly share the broadcast. Let other people who are not yet connected join us. And we implore you to also like the video. Then you also leave comments, share, and be part of the conversation. So thank you, Eric. You just mentioned that Chiroma is telling Cameroonians to take power back into their hands because it is their power, and they showed this power through the elections on October 12th when they elected him. But he's only the face of that power, the power that belongs to the people. But Chiroma calls for self-defense if Paul Biya and his regime do not release all those who were taken over the last few days and maybe years. But self-defense itself as a notion can be interpreted towards any direction. From your conversations with him, what do you understand as self-defense in the instant?
There are actions Mr. Chiroma could have taken after the election, which he did not take. And the reason he did not take those actions was because he's driven by one and overarching fact that he has expressed, that he does not want a single drop of Cameroonian blood to be lost in the quest for change. He does not want a single Cameroonian killed so that change can come to the country. He's absolute about that. And look, this is not politics. This is fact. And fact does not come in halves. This is truth. And truth is not malleable. Truth is absolute. Mr. Chiroma does not want a single blood of Cameroonian of the Cameroonian people lost because of the need for change. So when he talks about people defending their rights, this is a natural process. He wants those who have usurped power in the country to understand that the nation can reclaim that power, a symbolic figure in many ways. The real power should be expressed by the people, and that's what he's calling for. Let the world know, let Cameroonians know that what you stand for is change that is based on the demands of the people. I think that's what we're talking about here.
Why?
Yes.
Yeah, go
yes,
on.
Bernard.
Complete your thought pattern.
No, I'm just, the point I was making.
Yeah, I was saying
was
you should
that
complete your thought pattern.
Right. The point I'm making is that, Mr. Chiroma is the embodiment of change in the country. And what that means, in effect, is that power has been in the hands of an oligarchy, of a group of people who, in all its manifestations, does not really result in change and progress in Cameroon. I think, I'm hoping that I made the point, without diverging, into other areas of thought. So Chiroma wants, a new Cameroon that's based on values of truth and honesty and credibility. And I guess that's what we're talking about here.
Absolutely. In the speech in which he tries to shape his orientation, he uses terms like state-based terrorism and ethnic cleansing. In your view, by using such heavily and politically charged words, is he shaping the question in the right format and raising awareness on Cameroonians on what may be happening in the next few days as Cameroonians assert their right, their sovereignty, and their determination to reclaim their power?
Let me put it this way. I mean, there are a number of things that have to happen for us to find ourselves on a path of change. One of these things is the willingness to engage the nation in a pro-democratic conversation that will allow us to be more understanding in how we define the power that belongs to the people. That conversation needs to take place, and how we shape it and how we organize it so that we all increasingly improve on the quality of information that helps us define the road on which we have to take as a people to get to the desired development levels that we are working for. I think that it's important for all of us to understand the basic parameters around which those conversations have to be taken. And that's one of the things we're trying to do.
Yeah, these conversations mirror what happens across Africa. And I want to come back to the term that he used, state-based terrorism and ethnic cleansing. What we know is that it will be absolutely difficult for the current regime to willfully leave office. Of course, it's already evident they had to rig the elections in order to stay in the office. And staying in office means they want to stay there at all costs. There is a very high probability that they will make recourse to guns and other military weapons to silence the people. You've made a point here that if millions of Cameroonians present themselves in front of prisons and other detention centers to release Cameroonians who are there illegally, it will be absolutely impossible for the regime to apply those weapons. That is noted. But within the context of Africa, and for example, the Rwandan genocide, there was no pre-warning about state-based terrorism and ethnic cleansing. So by using these terms, is President Tchiroma appealing to the international community to pay critical attention and start sending warnings to Cameroon and the Biya regime before any of these starts to happen?
Bernard,
Are we together?
The nation is
okay.
Our nation is at a crossroads right now, and we have to make, in the coming days and weeks and months ahead, we have to decide whether we want a country that survives in the current circumstances to maintain the status quo, or do we want a country that is willing to move ahead? And I say this because it's important to define what I mean, define what is the status quo and what does progress represent. Think about the status quo, Bernard. We have a country that does not accept new ideas. No new ideas are welcome. The diaspora has, this is one country where the role of the diaspora has been increasingly reduced to insignificance. The status quo means those who have mismanaged the state, those who succeeded in moving Cameroon from a normal state to one of the most corrupt nations on the planet, a status quo that means in a land of plenty, so few have what it takes to survive. The status quo means with a rising number of people who do not have access to quality education, do not have access to quality health services. That is what the status quo means. More hungry people, more children out of school, more sick people uncared for, fewer and fewer people able to provide themselves 3 square meals a day, decaying infrastructure, unavailability of electricity and water, potable water, poor government services. You can go on and on. And this is what the status quo means. And we're asking ourselves, is it the Cameroon of the status quo that we fight for today? Or are we engaging in a new outlook of the future and working towards that? I think that's really what this comes down to. Are Cameroonians willing to stand up and be counted for change? Or, and this is what change means, or are we stuck in the status quo where nothing really changes, poverty continues to increase, and so on?
One thing that struck me in Chiruma's speech this morning was he said, I implore on you, Cameroonians. I implore on you, Cameroonians, which is a direct opposite of what Paul Biya ever does. Either he is giving instructions through his ministers or he is instructing Cameroonians on what they need to do. By using this language, is Tchiroma trying to make Cameroonians understand that he's at the same level with them because of the change that we need and we see in the horizon? Or is he just trying to plead with Cameroonians to understand that he is the only path to A to D? Is he working with them, collaborating with them, or he just wants to pull them along by trying to make them feel that he's one of them?
You know, Bernard, there were 12 candidates for the presidency, and one of them emerged as a man of the people. Not because he was a different kind of human being, just simply because he connected best with the people. That was what Mr. Tchiroma became. When the campaigns started in Cameroon, the campaigns for president started, nobody saw Tchiroma coming. As a matter of fact, these candidates are still around to confirm or not what I'm saying. When these campaigns started, I was naturally inclined to support two young people because I thought they represented the best forces of change. One of the candidates was called Hiram Iodi, and the other was called Ateki Caxton. So I naturally thought these 30-something-year-olds represented our best hope for change in Cameroon. So I was inclined to support them. And then, of course, things progressed, and I realized, okay, it could not be these two people that didn't have the quality, the kind of experiences that were needed to shift things in the country and to change the trajectory. That's what I thought. So we shifted we looked at what Ateki was doing, looked at what Hiram was doing, and came to the conclusion, I and others in the country, maybe we're better off having a transitional leadership, which would require that we bring in people with a certain level of experience that the younger people did not have. That's how things evolved, and we found ourselves dealing with Mr. Buba Bello and Mr. Issa Tchiroma. And then, of course, all of them went out on the campaign trail, and before long, we all recognized that the guy who had the language, who connected with people, who had the empathy that people recognized, was Issa Tchiroma. Without a doubt, he won these elections in a landslide. That's what happened. And that's the truth of the matter. It doesn't matter how it's been interpreted by folks, who are loyal to Mr. Biya or to anybody else. The facts remain the facts. The truth is the truth. Mr. Tchiroma won the elections, and it's a matter of time before he'd be installed as the third president of Cameroon. That's what we're looking forward to.
Fine. I wanted us to talk about the 48-hour ultimatum that Tchiroma has given to Paul Biya. But I first of all want us to look at the role of the international community. All of us are aware of the desperation that the Paul Biya regime has shown in order to get congratulatory letters from other governments around the world, even though the key geostrategic partners whose congratulations would mean something to Cameroon have not spoken. What do you think drives Paul Biya and this regime to go around fishing and maybe begging for letters of congratulations?
I have had the opportunity to tell some diplomats that the battle in Cameroon is our battle, not theirs. And even in my discussions with either Mr. Tchiroma or any of the other leaders that we engage with, we've always been clear to ourselves. Cameroon has to win this. Cameroonians have to win the battle, the war of independence and democracy and economic development. Cameroonians have to be in charge of that, define the path, and walk that road. It's dependent on us. But we live in a global community. And it's important that the world sees and engages with us in ways that are meaningful both to us and to the rest of the international community. That's what we're talking about here. And if Mr. Biya or anybody else for that matter is reaching out and looking for support It's simply to find legitimacy where it may or may not exist. And of course, they would use whatever they have to try and convince the national community that we are very much, and we still are very much a part of the global community. I think that's part of what they're trying to do here. But listen to this. 2 countries organized elections in October. 2 friendly, brotherly countries, so Cameroon and the Côte d'Ivoire. When the Americans wrote to Mr. Ouattara, who won in the Côte d'Ivoire, they congratulated him for winning an election. When they wrote to Mr. Biya, for reasons that may not be obvious to the rest of us, they did not congratulate Mr. Biya for winning an election. They congratulated Mr. Biya for being installed. What that tells you is even the international community sees beyond the cloak of lies that are operative in Cameroon to this day. They see through that. My only hope in saying this is that if these folks in the international community, see that, you, the Cameroonians, you ought to understand the deeper implications of that. We are building in Cameroon a house of falsehoods, based on falsehood. A house of lies cannot survive, not in the long term, not especially when we see it and the world starts seeing it. We cannot hide. The corruption in our country rose to be thin worldwide when our country became has almost always been projected as one of the most corrupt countries in the world. Cannot hide. And for precisely that reason, and this is why I say we need to educate our people, for precisely that reason, for reasons not unrelated to what the Americans did by saying, we congratulate you for your installation, not for your winning the election. They didn't say that. The unsaid things is what really matters here, But the world is seeing this, and because the world is seeing it, they're seeing the weaknesses of our institutions, the fact that our institutions are so easily manipulated, whether it's ELECAM, and we can talk about that if you wish, or whether it's the Constitutional Council. What tells some hopeful investor in Cameroon that the laws that have to be respected will be respected in Cameroon? And for that reason, and I've said this over and over, and I've said this many times, no honest investor is interested in Cameroon. Cameroon has not had any significant investments in at least 2 decades. And does that surprise any of us that hundreds of thousands of young people are coming out of our colleges and universities and cannot find jobs because this system does not create jobs, the economic system in Cameroon? And why are they not demanding it? Why are they not angry enough to demand it? And, I say this because it is fact. The fact is hundreds of thousands of young Cameroonians cannot find jobs. So they end up on motorbikes, they end up, as Bayam Selams, they end up on the streets. What is it about a rich country like Cameroon that its children have to continue to suffer? And this pain is what we are all dealing with, those of us who refuse to be in the system. And that's what Mr. Tchiroma is talking about. That's what he wants to change. Mr. Tchiroma was in a government where ordinary ministers are building palaces that Hollywood would be proud of. You've heard of one minister who has, and you're in the United States, who has a collection of cars that even Jay Leno, who's known as a car collector in America, Jay Leno will be humbled by. A minister in Cameroon. Think about this, Bernard. Every single car that this minister owns, for him to buy a car that costs $400,000, for him to buy that car, think about the number of coffee farmers whose entire annual earnings will go into buying one car. Think about farmers in the country, what it will take, how many farmers it will take to buy a Lamborghini. to buy the most expensive Rolls Royce on the market. This guy has all of these cars in great numbers, not in tens or 20s or 30s. This one guy has more. This is truth. And if any minister in Cameroon wants to challenge what I'm saying, let them come into your program and challenge it. And then we'll send a crew. I'll identify the minister, and you'll send a crew to take pictures of the cars that he owns. This is insane. This is not governance. Go look at the property of another minister. It will take 2 White Houses to be equal to that to a house by this minister. And yet he doesn't even have a good road. He has a road in his house, but not a good road that leads to it. Because the good road that leads to it will be used by ordinary Cameroonians. And that's not who he cares for. These are not only the complexities, but the unfortunate truths of our system that we're all fighting against. You must have heard of ministers over the summer who were competing to organize weddings for their children. Good thing, and it's a wonderful thing to organize a good wedding for your children, but not in the millions of dollars. I'm not talking about CFA francs. What does this say about who we are? Have we become that? We're so indifferent to, the fates of the vast majority of our people. There's something fundamentally wrong with that. That's not African. We don't produce cars. We don't produce. Look at the campaigns for president that Mr. Biya's people, not Mr. Biya maybe, but his people ran. Billions of francs to buy gadgets that were not produced in Cameroon. And again, I challenge them to prove the contrary. Billions of francs that could have built schools, hospitals, roads, and even allowed us to begin to transform some of our agricultural produce so we can generate foreign capital from it. No, it's not happening. That's not how they think. If any Cameroonians is listening to me, please spread the word. We've got to get rid of these people. And I say it with absolute determination. We've got to get rid of these people for the sake of a beautiful country that the Almighty God gave us.
Thank you so much, Eric. You've said a lot of things in there that I would like us to break them down so that people understand why there is so much anger and why there is that determination at this material moment to get change in Cameroon. The first, I just want to make some clarifications on what you said. We should invite those who are in the regime to come and talk here. We have actually sent out invites to CPDM top ranking officials to come to the Beyond Africa podcast. One of them accepted to come, but he did not show up when we were ready. We reorganized the podcast, but he did not come up. The first time he didn't show up, he apologized. Things didn't work out well with technology and all the rest because he's based in Cameroon. The next time he didn't apologize. Then we've written to the email of one of the subsections of the CPDM in the diaspora, inviting them to come to the Beyond Africa podcast. They replied they are discussing internally to know whether to come and when to come. That internal discussion has lasted more than 1 month. Just to say that we're opening the platform to everybody to come and justify what their positions are and tell Cameroonians where they stand. Maybe some Cameroonians come here and make claims or assertions that do not tie. But just come, you would answer our questions and you clarify the audience the most possible way you could. Then the second thing I wanted to talk about is the money. When you see the amount of money that they have accumulated, you understand why people who were strongly against them recently have suddenly changed and become their advocates. That is because they use this money to influence or to buy their consciences to become their spokespersons. So you see them online, they are the influencers online and on the media. Then the third point is they are definitely going to stay in power at all costs. They'll do everything to stay in power because they know that if they are out of power, justice would follow. They would be audited, they would be tried, and of course, they would face prison. Someone showed some images of Atanganji yesterday, saying he has always been committed to the cause by donating to ministers. I think at the time it was Minister Joseph Fofe. He was giving him some but we have credible reports from CONAC and other institutions that Atanganji has been indicted or has been suspected of being part of those who embezzled money from Campost and those who embezzled the COVID money. So you understand why they'll do everything to stay in power. But as you say, it lands in the hands and the laps of Cameroonians. Only Cameroonians can decide when and how these people leave power so that justice comes to Cameroonians. Justice in the sense that what belongs to Cameroonians comes to Cameroonians. Instead of taking state money to buy Lamborghinis, to build palaces, that money should come around to create jobs and investments in an economy that can support itself. This takes me to one of the things I heard about Paul Biya's speech on November 6th. He promised to reopen admissions into ENS and PhD programs. But President Chiruma's plan is completely different. He wants to open Cameroonians trade and vocational training. More of that. Why? Because we who have the PhDs in Cameroon are still looking for jobs and we cannot create jobs. But those who graduate from trade and vocational training centers are job creators and they will not move around looking for jobs. They'll be able to manage. An economy is built from the local environment with what you have. So that is one of the reasons for which Chiruma's plan might have caught the attention of most Cameroonians. Do you have anything to add to this, Eric? I know your phone is receiving many more calls.
No, that's what's disrupting the process for us, Bernard. Let me say
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, you have to rephrase the question. I got totally distracted by the many calls coming.
Yeah, I was just listing reasons why the current government would do everything to stay in power, to the extent of killing Cameroonians and abducting and kidnapping Cameroonians to keep them in detention centers. And how they are using state money to get influencers and buying consciences of those who yesterday were against them, but today they changed automatically. The regime got worse after the last 7 years. People who were strongly against them, and I can name a few names here, last 2 months ago, suddenly before the elections became strong advocates of the current regime. There is nothing that can convince me that that is not money. That is the power of money. And that is how they try to stay in government at all costs. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Did you have anything to add to this?
It is well known that money talks, and maybe that's why they've decided they'll just accumulate as much of it as possible. But let me say this: if they were accumulating the money and sharing some of it, the demand for change will not be as strong as it is. Nobody would be, there are lots of people in Cote d'Ivoire who would rather not have had Mr. Ouattara. But because they can point to things he has done for the general good, they are not as acerbic and as violent in their, had this regime even developed Yaoundé, which ought to be the symbol of what they've done with power. Had this regime even developed Yaoundé so that we could all be proud of it, we could say, well, we don't have enough food, we don't have enough water, but we have a beautiful city. Just like everybody talks about Kigali in Rwanda. But then you go to Kigali and you drive out of Kigali and you see progress too. But the point I'm making is that Kigali has become like the flower, like the shining symbol of that country and what it can do for its people. Why is Yaoundé not that? Why is Douala not that? Why don't we have something in Cameroon that we can be proud of and say, we have this and we can show the world as representing the Cameroon that we want? There's none of that. So these guys just take money. It's all about themselves. It's about their palaces. It's about their cars. It's about their girlfriends for whom the part of the men, the homes that, they build for these young women. That's what it's all about. This is the tragedy that we're fighting against. And the irony is we all seem to delight in somehow we want to live the lie. We delight in the lie. And those influencers, you see, who've changed radically changed their positions with regard to this government, they obviously delight in the lie. And the lie is this country, we are where we are because that's where we deserve to be. That's a lie. We have a president we've elected because he's the best, he has the best experience of presidents in the world. That's a lie. And we know it. And they know it. But we accept it. Mr. Biya is not the leader of Cameroon. We know that. We know that he didn't even know during the swearing in. God exposed him. And Mr. Biya seemed not even to know what was going on around him. That is truth. They are building their house on a fly. And we're saying, no, that's not good enough. We're not going to, we should not accept this. The people of, the younger people in the country, they know it. And then they come and they give them bread and sardines. They feed them for one day. When these should be young people not only working for themselves, but also providing for their families. Usually mothers and fathers in rural areas who have, strained to see them through schools and universities, and they cannot even provide for them in their older age. So, it is said sometimes that our people get the government they deserve. I want to think that Cameroon does not deserve the quality of leaders it has right now, money or no money. And I know that they're using a lot of money to buy over people. That's a tragedy. But then, if you read Prince by Machiavelli, one of the things he recommends is to impoverish your people if you want to constantly be in power, to keep power. Impoverish your people. So maybe that's what this regime has adopted. They keep your people poor, and then when you give them bread and sardine, they'll vote for you.
Absolutely. I think that is a principle. And the statement that a country deserves the leaders they get, I think that operates more in a system where people can actually choose their leaders rather than in a system where you have no opinion on who is your leader, because once you start giving an opinion, you're either killed, tortured, or taken to jail. But at the end of the day, once the people stand up, the leadership that follows that becomes the leadership that they deserve.
But that's the point
let's
we're
talk about
making,
the
that
48-hour ultimatum.
our people should stand up and defend, the options that they make. If that option is for better governance, improved quality of life in Cameroon, if that's the option, then they should stand up and demand it. And when you see a government that requires bullets to stay in office and not ballots, there's something fundamentally wrong with that government. That's the case in Cameroon today. They're opting for bullets, not ballots, to stay in office.
Yeah, it is as a consequence of these bullets they have opted for that Issa Tchiroma, who is depending on the ballots, has given them a 48-hour ultimatum to release all those who were kidnapped and are kept in detention centers. One observer who was a critic of the regime, but now runs a think tank that believes that Paul Biya should have been elected. He worked for Paul Biya to be elected. And he says a transition can only happen under Paul Biya, and was celebrating when Paul Biya was elected. Came out in reaction to Issa Tchiroma Bakary's 48-hour ultimatum. I'm talking about Dr. David Ebutu. And he said, Tchiroma, on négocie, on ne menace pas. Tchiroma will negotiate. We shouldn't be threatening, because Tchiroma issued a threat and a warning. So my conception has always been, when Paul Biya is under pressure, he creates a sub-problem, and the attention moves away from the main problem to the sub-problem, and the sub-problem is being targeted for treatment. If Tchiroma goes now to negotiate, would he be negotiating for the release of those who were kidnapped and are in detention centers, or would he be negotiating for his ballots to be respected?
Mr. Tchiroma is not going to negotiate with this government. We all want peace. We all would avoid bloodshed. We all would rather that this transition in Cameroon be done on a fair and democratic basis. That's what we all would desire. Mr. Tchiroma is totally, as far as I know, totally not out of any desire to negotiate with this government. Because think about it, anything that keeps this government in place, they're going to use every possible trick in the book to survive this time around. And if they do, what do you think they'll do in 7 years? They'll only perfect that system and stay for another 7. And by the time those 7 years are over, they're again perfecting it, bringing their children into the process so it continues. Ad infinitum. That's it. Allowing this system to survive in 2025 will ensure that they perfect the system for 2032 and beyond. So every Cameroonian who is sick and tired of these people must rise, not to provoke a violent revolution, must rise quietly to claim the victory that Mr. Tchiroma has. They could claim it by staying at home. A total boycott of sorts could be one way to claim it. A ghost town of sorts could be one way of claiming that victory. It doesn't have to be violent. And when Mr. Tchiroma says, go and release your children from jail, if hundreds of thousands of Cameroonians do that, no army in the world will stop them. So we're looking for ways to get the system moving again, moving in the direction of change without resulting in bloodshed of any sort.
When I listened to Tchiroma today, I didn't have the impression that he spoke to the consciences of the military. Why so at this material moment?
Well, he has said that over and over. And, the folks in the military who've called to pledge their allegiance to him, I do know that. And again, he's not, he may want to confirm this or not when he speaks to the nation. But I think there are enough people in the army today who totally believe that change has to come to Cameroon. And it's change for the good. It's change that would benefit the vast majority of Cameroonians, 20, 30 million Cameroonians, than change that continues to benefit a handful of Cameroonians who do not maybe even count up to 10,000. So a vast number in the army today in Cameroon want the change that benefits the country. It cannot be otherwise. It cannot be otherwise. The vast majority of our army cannot be against change that benefits the people. Otherwise, something fundamentally wrong. So I think I think there's been enough indication from Mr. Tchiroma that he wants an army that's Republican in nature, that continues to support our institutions and does not turn its weapons against Cameroonians. They're there to defend the nation, not to fight against citizens. So his position on that is very clear.
Exactly. After our open letter to soldiers, to the military, the gendarmes, and the police in Cameroon, we've been receiving messages in our inbox by people who are from the military and say they are from the military and saying they are very aligned with Cameroonians because they want change. And they say that in most military barracks, Tchiroma won because they want change. And I think that is a message that Cameroonians are sending across to everyone. I want us to start wrapping up. If you were to talk to Cameroonians right now about President Tchiroma's next step, I just want to highlight the fact that most Cameroonians, especially online, were worried when they did not see Mr. Tchiroma speak over the last few days, and most thought that Mr. Tchiroma had lost his positioning or was no longer interested in fighting for change. But his outing today consolidates the fact that he is ready and he is determined to carry his change to the last end. But I also want to highlight the fact that in the course of the week, I also want to highlight the fact that yesterday I produced a video that talks about Mr. Tchiroma's strategic silence. He wasn't just silent, he was definitely working on something, and that something, part of it was released earlier today. So his silence should not be read as failure, abandonment, or being disillusioned or corruption. As you have all heard, I think we've lost Eric. As you have all heard from Eric, the problems in Cameroon remain the same. And Tchiroma understands that Cameroonians are with him because he brought it.
Sorry about this. Maybe we should round up as he said.
Yes. So what is your last word to Cameroonians?
Fairly straightforward, Bernard. One is, do we want a different country? Do we want governance in that country that serves all of us? Or do we want a country where there's more investments in an economy that can generate jobs so that our young people can have a better life? Do we want a country when more than just a handful of people get the most from the resources of the land? These are real questions, and they're questions that are born out of the experience of the country today. If you want a different country that provides answers that are different from all the ones we see today, if you want a different country, then you've got to work for it. You can't sit at home or can't sit back and expect somebody to bring about the change you desire. The change, Mr. Tchiroma is only one Cameroonian amongst 30 million. He alone cannot want change and expect it to happen. The majority of Cameroonians have to want change. And I think there is more than enough evidence that they want change. And if they want change, you cannot play with the figures out of the voting booths and then say, well, you voted for change, but the same people will sit in office and not bring about change. It just does not add up. And I think that's what we I hope that anybody listening to this podcast will at least come out of it with a question. Does Cameroon have what it deserves? Do Cameroonian people really want change, and are they fighting for it? Are they in support of the one man who has said, I will do what it takes to introduce change to Cameroon. I'll revise that constitution as needed. I will bring about national reconciliation, which is something that we so badly need. I'll rethink the economy. I'll rethink the judicial system. I will improve on our health and educational services. Mr. Tchiroma is saying that health, education, justice, the economy. He has said these things. And if we all agree that that's where our problems are, then let's join him in this battle. Let's join him. It's our battle, not his alone. He's only one of 30 million of us. So yes, I want to invite, as we end up, Bernard, I want to invite every Cameroonian to, in the United States, in Britain, in Europe, in the larger part of Europe, in Africa, everywhere, and Asia. I want to invite them to each play the role that is theirs. Every one of us has a role if our country is going to move in the direction we want it to. And I invite everybody to rise up to the occasion. History is watching.
Thank you so much, Eric. Thank you, dear viewers, for watching this episode of the Beyond Africa podcast. It is always very interesting with Eric, but at the same time, he's very committed to ensure that this change comes. So he's very busy working on all cylinders, working with everyone to ensure that there is coordination. And if you don't hear from Eric, if you don't hear from President Tchiroma, you definitely know that they are working in the background. I released a video earlier today on President Tchiroma's silence as being strategic. I invite you all to watch that video on the Beyond Africa podcast, because over the last week, many people have been asking where President Tchiroma is and what the next steps are going to be. So that video contains why he was silent and explains how we should read the silence and where we should go to for information. For information, you can come to the Beyond Africa podcast. You can go to the Mimimefo info. You can go to CNN News Agency, and you can also go to Project C. They have news handles on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, where information is available. There are also a plethora of sources out there. You can go to Zuimanto, you can go to Paul Chuta, you can go to Professor Aimé Bonissa if you are French speaking. These are other platforms where you can get reliable information about the movement. Don't go to places where they'll give you information that is unverified or information that is designed to discourage you and to weaken you. So watch the video on Tchiroma's silence and why it terrifies Yaoundé. Thank you all for watching this episode of the Beyond Africa podcast, and see you in the next episode.
Thank you.